Good morning, friends. I'm so glad you're here with me for this really exciting day. It is the first day I'm planting seeds for the 2022 growing season. I'm hanging out here in my garage, which is my seed starting area. At our past house, I also used our garage as a seed starting area and had one indoors as well, just to keep those tomatoes and peppers a little bit warmer. So I'm going to be showing you my seed starting setup. I'm going to be showing you the soil I'm going to be using to start seeds, and I'm going to get some seeds started. Now the seeds I'm starting, don't you get worried, I'm not starting them too early, are going to be some onions and some perennial flowers, things that need to be started about 12 weeks before your first frost date. So if you haven't really ever started seeds before, the first thing you're going to need to know is your first frost date. Just kidding, your last frost date. We're in the spring. So you're going to base your timeline for when you start your seeds based on when your last frost date is. And you're going to count backwards from there to the number of weeks before your last frost. If you haven't seen my garden planning calendar video, I'm going to put that link in the description below or something like that, and you can check that out because it's got a lot more detail on how to plan your garden so that your starts are ready when it's time to go outside. But today we're not going to go into those details. I am, however, going to show you the equipment that I have and show you my process that I'm going to be using for starting seeds, onions, and perennials. Let's get started. So this shelving system is really nice, super strong. It's from Home Depot, I believe. It's got 5 shelves, and I've got 3 shelves of lighting. Each shelf has 2 LED lights hanging from it, and on each shelf I can start 4 10-20 trays. So a 10-20 tray is this garden style tray you got here. So I'm going to show you my trays here in just a minute and tell you more about which ones I like and then what sort of inserts I'm going to be using inside of those. So with this setup, I can slide in 4 trays per shelf, and here on this shelf I happen to have this little piece of insulated bubble stuff that I just put on there for a little extra warmth, and I've got 3 heat mats for my seedlings. Now the heat mats I don't keep on the seedlings all the time. Once they're germinated, I usually wean them off those and start using them for another set of plants that I am starting to germinate. So this shelving unit was about $100 at Home Depot. Super worth it. It's super sturdy. I use it the top levels for storage. Only thing I wish was that it had wheels. And we could probably figure out a way to add wheels, but that's just one more project. But one reason I'd really like it to have wheels is that at this house, we're lucky enough again to have at our last house we actually had a east-facing garage, so it got the morning sun, and this has a south-facing garage, so I can open up these garage doors when it gets nicer out, and the plants can start to get acclimated to the full spectrum of rays that the sun provides compared to these. So it's getting them acclimated for being outside. And if I had wheels, I could even push out the shelves for the day and then roll them back in at night to keep them warm at night. But they don't have wheels, and the models with wheels were a lot more expensive, so maybe someday we'll get some wheels. All right, next up, let's talk growing medium. So today, last year, I made my own seed starting mix out of compost. Nope, I didn't use compost. Let me try that again. I used peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite. And then later on, when I wanted to make it more of a potting mix versus a seed starting mix, I added compost in there as well so it could have those nutrients. So this year, I'm not doing my plant sale, so I'm not going to plan for such a high volume of plants. So I may end up making my own seed starting mix a little bit later once I'm growing a lot more starts, but right now I'm trying to keep things simple and easy. I've got so much going on in the garden with getting the gardens set up and ready to house the plants or grow the plants that I just bought a bag of potting mix. Let's go take a look. So the potting mix that I'm going to be using today is this G&B Organics potting soil for indoor and outdoor plants. Now, it's January. Yeah, it's still January. It's January, and it's actually really hard for me to find good quality potting mix this time of the year. A lot of your big box stores, everything is sitting outside. It's dripping wet. It's gross. And I have a feeling a lot of it's going to have fungus gnat eggs in it. And I am just paranoid about fungus gnats. And so I actually bought a bag from a big box store. It was a nice organic mix. So, you know, potential good quality, but it was just super waterlogged. And I thought about adding boiling water to it to make sure that I could kill off any fungus gnats. Well, I did that, and then I just had a puddle of mud because it was so wet. So I found this at my local True Value in town, and they actually keep it stored underneath an awning so it's nice and dry, which for me is really important because I just feel like it's gonna have I just like it, okay? I like it. So what I'm going to be doing today, because this is not a seed starting mix, is going to have larger chunks of bark in it and things like that. So I'm actually going to sift this potting soil to sift out any large chunks of bark so that it's a nice fine mix for seed starting. And right here I've got an expanded metal mesh panel that my dad gave to me. You could also use hardware cloth, like 1/4-inch hardware cloth. To sift out any of those bark chunks. You could even just pick them out. If you don't have anything like that, you don't got to get all fancy with a sifter. Just try to get as many of those bark chunks out as possible so that when your seedlings are germinating, they're not having to fight off a piece of bark right on top of them. This soil is actually really nice. There's not too many large chunks of bark or anything like that, but you can see here that that's the type of thing I'm trying to filter out. And I'm just gonna rub it against this, and you know, I'm thinking actually a lot of this bark's probably just gonna fall through, but I'm doing my best I can here. Alright, so what's left is mostly just bark chunks, and if I were to try to sift out the rest of this soil, I would probably end up putting a lot of this bark chunks underneath. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take this outside, put these bark chunks somewhere out yonder. I've got a pretty fine potting mix now. There are still chunks of bark that got through, but I can take those out by hand once I'm potting things up, or planting seeds. But this is a nice improvement. Now you might be wondering, why am I using potting mix instead of seed starting mix? Seed starting mix is joyously fluffy. I love it, but it is expensive. That's why I made my own last year, but I didn't want to spend the same amount I spent on a cubic foot of soil here. If I would have bought seed starting mix, I would have gotten a bag. I don't know what the volume is of the bag, but probably about at least a quarter of the size. So much better value to go this route. But I will say, if you don't mind spending the money, seed starting mix is quite nice. But this turned out really well. So what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to be filling up my seed trays. Now I already have planned out what I'm going to be putting in my seed trays. So I'm going to actually just take my 10-20 trays and put them in here, and that's going to be the easiest way for me to fill them up. This seed starting tray is just your average tray you would find at a home improvement store. It is very thin, very flimsy, and it's not my favorite. Inside it, I've got these 6 cell packs, which I ordered a ton last year for when I did my plant sale, and I'm going to be growing these in various things in here. I also have other size trays that I'll be using, but for now I'm going to start out with these. And I highly recommend, if you want to get into starting your own plants, to invest in some high quality seed starting trays. I've got two other brands of seed starting trays. I have this kind right here. So these are the 1020 trays from Bootstrap Farmer, and they are so durable. Yes, they're expensive, but you're not going to be making a poor investment. A few bucks more and you're going to have yourself a nice solid tray that's going to last a long time. Plus, when you're moving your plants in and outside, once you start getting them acclimated for being planted out, these are a lot stronger and you're not going to be having a wibbly wobbly tray. I also have this other off-name brand that I bought on Amazon. Forget what it's called. It is definitely higher quality than what you would find in a local home improvement store, but it is not as nice as Bootstrap Farmer. And the only reason why I bought these is because the Bootstrap ones were back ordered and I couldn't get them as quickly as these ones, but they were the same price. So plan ahead, get yourself some Bootstrap Farmer trays. They're fabulous. I've got these 4 trays filled up with soil, and as I was doing this, I remembered one thing I normally like to do before I fill my trays is to wet the soil a bit before putting it into the tray. This helps with a couple of different things. It makes the soil really nice and moist for the seeds, so you don't have to water it very much. And then when you're watering dry soil, a lot of times it can really settle the soil, and if you pre-moisten it, then it's going to settle better in the containers, so you know what you're working with. But it's not a big deal if I didn't do it, so I'm just gonna get started as is. I'm gonna be starting out with my onions. So these onions are ones that I've had in my seed stash. I buy a lot of Ed Hume seeds. Ed Hume is a local seed company. But you know, I'll be real honest, I haven't actually researched into where the farms are, where they grow their seeds. But they're a local seed company. And what's extra special is that Ed Hume used to have a gardening show that my dad would listen to on the radio religiously when I was a kid. So it brings back a lot of good memories for me. So I've got the early yellow globe, which is a storage onion. And then I've got, of course, the, oh no, that's not the of course. The of course is the Walla Walla Sweet, which Walla Walla Sweets are named after a city in Washington, Walla Walla. However, they are east of the mountains, so they get a lot warmer summers than we do here on the west side of the mountains. These grew really well for me last year. And then I also have these sweet Spanish Utah Jumbo, which is also a, is it a storing onion? Well, golly, I don't know. I'll figure that out. So I've got these 3 types of onions, and then I've ordered some seeds from a local seed company a few counties north of me, and I'm really excited to get those, but they're not going to be shipping until February. So I usually like to start my onions in January, and those ones will just be ready later in the season, but it won't be too late. So I'm excited because those seeds have been grown at a farm in a similar climate to mine, so I'm hoping those onions are going to perform really well. So I'm probably going to plant maybe about 10 seeds per cell in my 6 cell packs, and these separate so easily when it comes time to transplant them. Hey guys, this is actually just about 2 weeks into the future from what I was just doing a couple seconds ago. So got a little caught up in the gorgeous weather we had the day I was seeding these plants originally, and I went outside for a walk in the woods and got distracted, and then as I was editing this video I realized I never finished. So here I am 2 weeks later, and look at all the growth on those seeds. Here we've got the spinach looking good. We've got lacinato kale looking okay. The leaves aren't the healthiest looking. They've got like a little yellowing on the edges, and they were a little slow to germinate. I'm wondering if maybe the seed's getting a little old. It was packed for 2019, so it could be that. Then here we've got the red Russian kale, which is doing really well. You can see that some of these are starting to get a little floppy. It's definitely time for me to bring out the fan and get them blowing on these starts. So these are doing really well. I'm going to show you the other seeds that I started, about 12 days ago, and then I'm going to get my pepper seeds started. We've got sprouts for the romaine, for the mesclun mix, and no sprouting action on the pansies yet. The first sprouts of echinacea are starting. These daisies from the Dollar Tree are doing fabulous. They came up super quick. And over here with these black-eyed Susans, no action on those starts yet. On to the onions. The early yellow onions are doing awesome. They were packed for this growing season. The Walla Wallas are doing awesome. They were also packed for this growing season. These are the sweet Spanish Utah Jumbos, which were packed for the 2020 or 2021 growing season. And you can see that their germination rate is a lot slower. Interesting though, look here how on just this side there's more germination than this row. Maybe I ought to flip that because these are just 6-cell packs, so I could definitely flip that around. So now that my seeds are sprouted, instead of misting and watering from the top, I'm going to be bottom watering. So what I do is just pick this up and I pour water into the bottom of the tray. And to know when it's time to water, I'm going to wait till the top of the soil dries out. And you can see here, these areas, the soil is still wet. So if I'm concerned that these aren't getting enough water because these ones have dried out sooner, I can always top water these a little bit, but I really think they're going to be fine because you can see that the soil in here is still moist. So the reason for the bottom watering is that you're going to stimulate root growth to be reaching down so to get to the water. So that's one reason. Another reason is that it's going to help with fungal issues, dampening off so that the top of your soil is not constantly moist and that it's really going to be wicking up the moisture throughout the whole soil profile in each cell. For starting my peppers, I'm going to be using this 72 cell tray. Or insert. So this has 72 cells in it, and I'm going to just put it inside a 10-20 tray. Now, earlier I forgot to mention the reason why this is called a 10-20 tray is because the measurements are approximately 10 by 20. So I might regret putting these in the 10-20 tray because I'm actually going to be putting peppers and some flowers in here, which normally I would not do two totally different things like that, but I'm just going for it right now, and we're just going to see how it works. I'm thinking by the time I need to pot up the peppers that these flowers will also be ready to go, and we'll just get them out of here. It's possible that the flowers are going to germinate a lot quicker than the peppers, which can get a little problematic for leaving on the humidity dome and just for size in there, but if there's any problems, I can always pot up what's growing too fast. This time I made sure I pre-moistened my potting mix so it's ready to go. It has some good moisture to it, so when I'm filling these cells, the soil's already going to be compacted a little bit, and it's just going to be easier to hydrate the seed and keeping it at the depth in that soil that I want it to be at. So while I am filling my soil here, I want to talk to you about your last average frost date. So I moved to a new area. This is my first growing season in this area. I'm still in the same zone, but my last average frost date is still about the same as what it used to be. I put a post into my local farming community group on Facebook asking around what people's thoughts were on the last frost and when they thought it might be. So what I've decided to do is that I'm going to plan for my last frost to be April 9th. However, I'm not going to plan to put out my really cold tolerant, heat loving crops like peppers and tomatoes and things like that until a couple weeks after of that. And one of the reasons why is your last frost is just an estimate. It's not always going to be at that time. And those heat loving crops around here in the Puget Sound and Pacific Northwest, just because the last frost date has happened doesn't mean that it's actually warming up. We can continue to have some pretty cold weather for quite a while, and it's not really what the tomatoes and peppers are going to thrive in. So for my cold tolerant plants, I'm going to plan my last frost date to be April 9th. For my hot loving things, I'm going to wait until May to plant those out. So my planting calendar for those is going to be just a little bit different. So right now, I think we're about 9 or 10 weeks to go until our last average frost date. Which for peppers, you want to start them probably about 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost. Now for me, even though my last frost date is 9 weeks away, I'm really not going to be putting these out for probably more like 13 weeks. However, we are going to be going on a out-of-town trip, and I either want to plant them now so that they have germinated before I go on my trip, so that my caretaker can easily bottom water these instead of having to nurture them by watering them from the top. I either wanted to plant these before or after, and I just feel like after would be just a bit too late. So these might be a little early, but that's okay. I'm also growing these and planning on keeping them in my garage primarily. Now, if I were to keep them in the house where it's 60 to 70 degrees, more like 60, they're gonna grow a lot quicker. Out here in the garage, it's hovering more like 50, and they're gonna grow a little bit slower. So it's okay that I'm planting them, probably about 13 weeks before I plan on planting them outside. This little tool is called a dibber. It has little measurements on this tip right here, so you can poke a little hole and you know what depth your seed's gonna be at. So I can just put my seed right on top of the soil and poke that in and then cover it up. Or I could poke the hole, drop the seed in, and then cover it up. Super handy tool. I got this on Amazon with a kit of a couple other things. This little, I forget the name of the other tool. It helps you remove seedlings. Super cool. For these peppers, I'm just going to be planting 1 seed per cell. That's one of the benefits of using these small cells. There's even trays that have way smaller cells that you can just put 1 seed per cell, and you're not wasting your seed having to snip off any ones that you don't want to use or separate them and transplant them. And this seed is fresh for this year, so I feel super confident on its germination rate. Now, let's talk about pepper varieties. So I am definitely not an expert pepper grower. I'm new to growing peppers, and one thing that I have noticed with heat-loving long season crops is that here in the Puget Sound or Pacific Northwest, you could even apply this to other shorter growing seasons. Is that it's hard for me to be able to grow, and this is without a high tunnel or greenhouse. It's hard for me to be able to grow really large fruiting varieties. So a really large bell pepper or a really large tomato is going to be difficult for me to grow and get it to size and really get a good harvest from them. I might only get just a few. So I'm looking generally for varieties that are early maturing and meant for northern climates so that they are more prolific in a shorter growing season. Another thing that really helps is to focus on varieties that are a bit smaller. And for tomatoes, that works really awesome for me because I absolutely love cherry tomatoes. So I grow a lot of cherry tomatoes. However, in regards to peppers, we are actually big fans of bell peppers. We don't like hot peppers. I like the meaty, big peppers that can really bulk up a meal. So that leads me to bell peppers, which again are going to be a little more challenging for me to grow. So I have gotten some varieties this year. I have 3 varieties of bell peppers, and they are all intended for short season. Whoa, wrong spot. They're all intended for short seasons or early maturing varieties so that I can hopefully have some better luck in growing them. Last year I grew a lot of smaller varieties of peppers, but I just didn't find them as useful in our eating as I do for these larger, thicker walled peppers. Hopefully this year we will have some good luck with these varieties. If not, I know I can do a great job growing smaller variety peppers. Just have to grow a lot of them to get the volume I'm looking for. Well, friends, I've got those seeds planted the peppers and some more perennial flowers. I did not get to the broccoli that I need to plant, but it is time that I end this video before I get distracted again. So thank you so much for sticking with me as I showed you what I'm starting here for my very first seeds of the 2022 growing season. I'm so excited to get things growing. I'm really excited for you to get things growing, whether it's your first time growing something from seed, or maybe you don't even plan on growing something from seed this year, but you're interested in maybe starting next year. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. You can also email me. My email is in the description of the video. I'd love to help you figure out what you want to plant in your garden, when the best time to start your seeds are, and help you just get growing. Thanks so much and have a great day.